This is a squawk box used for reading sound. 2 channels, mono. Another NPR.
Voiceless portable reflex.
At least 25 pounds.
20 and a half with that motor. They made 11 different motors, however. And this is the umbilical cord wiring diagram. Let's get that to zoom to a full screen. This is totally unscripted. These are battery chargers. John is in the middle there. John went out there at the age of 15, and his father, Lawrence K. Marshall, who was the president of Raytheon, threw a camera at him, and he said, "You're going to be the photographer." And that lasted the rest of John's life.
Oh, yeah.
You couldn't set the NPR down without putting it into this aluminum cradle, which was a couple of pounds. It was the camera for BBC. That was the camera that shot Woodstock. They had 17 of them, all powered by AC motors to keep them in sync.
And that magazine shot 10 minutes of film, and it took about 3 minutes to change it to the next magazine. 10 minutes. Can you imagine?
This is an Ampex 600, which is one of the kinds of recorders that Alan Lomax would have used in his in his middle period.
These were some of the early credits from DER films in the 70s.
This is a quiet camera. It's the Oricon. Good for newsreel shooting. We're going to show clips from this film. It's called The New Air, N-U-E-R.
I think this cost about $30,000, $40,000, this camera,
I could have told you, but I don't remember.
in 1975.
Yeah.
Cost of a house.
That's a Nagra, made in Switzerland. The best tape recorder ever, analog.
Completely worthless today.
It weighed about 25 pounds, and that's me carrying it, and I have back problems for the last 15 years because of it.
This is another version of the eclair called the ACL on that cameraman's shoulder. The gadget in the front is a footage counter. The numbers are about 1/4 of an inch high. We're back to where we started. We really should get going here.
Those are splicing, but you had to use glue to splice film and sound. Took forever. Yeah, I'm ready to start.
Well, we are all ready to start, but we want to first thank Stuart Cody and Sarah Elder for this pre-show. We hadn't planned to have the live commentary on the slideshow, but we were really glad to have learned from you and to also have a taste of what we have in store for you tonight. My name is Hayden Guest. I'm director of the Harvard Film Archive, which, if you don't know, is just next door at the ground level, the foundational level of the Carpenter Center for the Visual Arts. And I'm really pleased to be working together with the Harvard Art Museums, to be here in Menschel Hall. I think this is the first time we've had an event that's split between these two neighboring spaces. So thank you for this collaboration. I just want to welcome you all and also to say how really pleased and proud I am that the Harvard Film Archive is celebrating DER, Documentary Educational Resources, a pioneering documentary distributor that's been around since 1968, founded by John Menschel and Tim Ash in that year, and continuing to this day to be one of the world's most important distributors of ethnographic and documentary cinema on the very cutting edge. And I want to acknowledge and thank the executive director of DER, Alice Apley, who is a filmmaker and anthropologist in her own right, and I just want to thank her for working together with us. I want to acknowledge my colleague Brittany Gravely, who's here tonight, who actually curated the wonderful selection of DER films that we have as a highlight of this current HFA season. Please pick up a calendar and take a look at what's in store for you. We also have a screening which starts at 8 o'clock, so just a little bit after this wonderful event ends. So I please welcome you and encourage you to come to that screening. I'm not going to say anything about this remarkable panel of distinguished guests and experts that's here, but I'm just going to ask you to please join me in welcoming Alice Apley.
Okay, thank you, Hayden. I want to welcome you all to tonight's event, A Conversation About Sound. This is the first event in the fall, for the fall in celebration of DER's 50th anniversary, which will be with screenings here at the HFA, in New York City at the Margaret Mead Film Festival, and in California with a special program on Tim Ash at the University of Southern California, and programs at the American Anthropological Association meetings in San Jose. I want to thank first the many partners at Harvard with whom we've been working, including Molly Ryan, the staff of the Harvard Art Museums, Brittany and Hayden of the Harvard Film Archive, as well as the Museums of Science and Culture and the Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology, including programmers, publicists, and projectionists. As a small, scrappy organization, it is a pleasure to work with the well-oiled machinery and extensive resources of the different entities here at Harvard. Also, a big thanks to Lyda Kuth and the Left Foundation, who have generously sponsored our Cambridge 50th anniversary events, and who share with us a deep commitment to the local filmmaking community, both past and present. Finally, thanks to the DER staff and board members, without whom any of this would have been possible. We have staff and former staff and interns here as well. And if staff members and board members just want to raise their hands, just so you see them. Great. 50 years is a long time. And it's been a time of tremendous change in documentary filmmaking in terms of the technologies and access to media making and the popularity and infrastructure in documentary. There have been many changes, too, in anthropology, with the transition, if I may grossly simplify, from looking at bounded so-called tribal communities to understanding global flows of people, resources, and identities. This anniversary for DER is an opportunity to celebrate and reflect on our past and build a vision of the future. Over the next few months, we will be screening films from across these 50 years and encouraging dialogue about what makes for successful media that documents people's everyday lives, communities, and cultures. and reaffirming our commitment to the importance of this work for building a critical artistic practice and for building a world that is more informed and engaged in embracing all kinds of diversity. For tonight's panel in particular, we're looking at sound. The impetus for this emerged from the recognition that the classic period of ethnographic filmmaking, and I'm talking here about the period from the 1950s through the 1980s, was very much in dialogue with the development of sync sound, working with it, working without it, and working against it. Also, because sound, while always an essential component of filmmaking, has historically gotten less attention than the visual, often being relegated to second-class status. Today, both in anthropology and filmmaking, we're experiencing a renaissance of sound, with a new appreciation for the importance of sound, both human-made and otherwise, for connecting with characters on film and in our experience of an environment, and in sound design and the challenge of conveying those aspects of place to an audience. Shortly after this panel, please join us for a film screening that Hayden mentioned at the HFA starting at 8. The program focuses on sound as subject, starting with Buck Dancer, a short film by Bess Lomax Hawes featuring a Mississippi fife player, and a sneak preview screening of The Sound of Bells, which investigates the language of church bells in Minas Gerais in Brazil, and was made by 2 Brazilian filmmakers, Marina Tomei and Marcia Mansour. I'd also like to invite you to take a brochure about our 50th anniversary events on your way out and get on our mailing list. I hope you enjoy tonight's program. So now I want to introduce the moderator for this evening, Ilisa Barbash, and she will then introduce the rest of the program. So Lisa is a curator of visual anthropology at Harvard's Peabody Museum and a co-filmmaker of Sweetgrass with Lucian Castaing-Taylor. Based on her most recent book, Where the Roads All End, Photography and Anthropology in the Kalahari, she has curated the exhibition Kalahari Perspectives, Anthropology, Photography, and the Marshall Family to open at the Peabody Museum on September 27th of this month. Yep. Thank you. Yeah, I realized that. I should have just...
So we are going to start with a taste of what you're going to hear. Can we start the sound? And can we cut the lights?
Yep. We can do it from here.
Yeah, cool.
إنما الدور بينها حدا قلبي برود تغارك وزاري أطنطو غدري يجي ورق قريت نري السهل غدري كل من الأم حاضر مدرسة شو وقت تصور مثل مجموعة العائلة كده بورقش نبلي كيس كمية عمار للا دباد المسافة كيس اللان
Ike ana konka kiwodon akan ana konka adaisi o ana zilin ndar saskara za urko so angiza ko so dutta ko taga
in the place where I was supposed to stand they set it up and everything, and I was all set to go. You know, I had my headdress, my belt, my new dance fans.
All right. So will the panelists come up, please? So I'm going to give you an idea of what you're going to be seeing tonight. Hopefully you got a little bit of a taste with this last series of sound clips put together. We have tonight 3 stars, all who've emerged from the Boston area, some of whom are still here. And we had a lot of emails, but no real meetings to set this up. So it's a little bit of seat of your pants flying, but it'll be mainly clip-based. We'll be showing clips and then talking about the sound sound innovations contained in each of the clips. In one of our emails, Stuart Cody described himself as the ghost of celluloid, as Sarah Elder as the present reality, Ernst Karel as the ghost of future sound. I did not check with anyone whether those nicknames were okay, but so don't call them that. So Stuart Cody, in 1963, 1964, worked at Harvard's Carpenter Center for the Visual Arts, providing technical support for the Film Study Center and the Film Production Program. Since 1967 and 1968, Stuart has supported national and local filmmakers, including his friend John Marshall, with technologies for small crew location shooting, including developing lightweight, non-rechargeable lithium batteries trademarked as the Expedition battery. Sarah Elder is an international award-winning documentary filmmaker who has worked with Alaska Native communities since 1973. Her work focuses on collaborative media practices, indigenous sovereignty and heritage, and the ethics of filming across cultural and social boundaries. From 1970 to 1972, while studying at Brandeis, she apprenticed to Tim Ash and John Marshall at the Center for Documentary Anthropology, which later became DER. Ernst Karel works with sound, including electroacoustic music, experimental nonfiction sound works, and post-production sound for nonfiction film and video. While working with Harvard's Sensory Ethnography Lab and Film Studies Center from 2006 and 2017, he worked on the sound for Sweetgrass, Monica Mana, Leviathan, and the Iron Ministry. He's back this fall as a visiting lecturer teaching a practice-based course in sonic ethnography. So all of the films you're going to see tonight, with one exception, are distributed by DER. We've got all sorts of pamphlets and things in the back for you to sign up for DER's mailing list or get some of DER's brochures. It's a wonderful organization that supports, as you'll see, really incredible films. We're going to start with a clip from a film called The Feast from 1968. by Tim Ash and Napoleon Chagnon from their first expedition to the Yanomamo in the Venezuelan Amazon. And the personal link to that film is that Stuart made the battery belts for that film, for the filmmakers. Is that true?
I checked this. It's not right.
Oh, okay.
It was a later expedition.
Okay. So
the first one was done when I wasn't around.
Okay. Well, he made the battery belts for some of the other films. So the sound for this, we believe, is by Craig Johnson. Does anyone else want to set up the feast? Or should we just run the clip? Can we just run it?
Well, they have Chaz Bicking's name spelled wrong on the credits.
Finally, visitors begin to leave.
More than that.
Those who remain behind make last-minute exchanges, giving, for example, a palmwood bow for a palmwood bow. The value of the item is irrelevant, since the purpose of the exchange is to create mutual obligation. Krihisiwa's bearded brother is distressed that the visitors claimed his dog. He will demand something valuable at the next feast, and as a visitor, will not easily be refused.
All right, lights. So why did we pick this clip?
Well, first because we thought Stuart had worked on it, but but it's an interesting kind of example of this technique that was at the time, and maybe several of Tim Ash and Chagnon's films, where the whole first part that we saw the end of is them sort of telling you how you should interpret what's going to follow. So you're sort of given your marching orders, and focus is narrowed down to a specific set of topics by using this voiceover and, you know, combined with still photography. And then what's indeterminate finally is able to be shown on its own, you know, the indeterminate, you know, meaning that we're making of the image, and especially the ambiguous sound that is, as it turns out, sync. We're not sure at first, but it turns out it is. You don't think it is? I mean, we see his lips moving there. That's why I thought maybe it was sync. What do you think?
I think it was like Marshall's technique. I talked to the Craig Johnson who did all the second expedition like 2 weeks ago, and I'm pretty sure he said this was half of it was NonSync. So it was the sound was recorded in the field and then added to match every single action. So the sounds were coming from the field, but they didn't have the connection to the camera.
Stuart?
I don't know. That sing-songy part where we heard him speak seemed like it was really sync.
Let's.
It's ambiguous.
It could have been recorded simultaneously, but it might not have tracked the footage all the way along. You can usually, if you know the material, you can usually fit some sound in there, and then it's cutting a frame out here and there and adding frames in.
That's maybe
very tricky editing.
This is a
none
good,
of us know personally exactly how it was.
Yeah, this would be a good moment maybe to talk about what makes for sync sound.
Yeah, that distinction between sort of sync and sync maybe would be good to describe.
Well, let's see what's coming up.
Well, we're going to go into Num Chai.
Which is definitely not sync.
So, well, basically, those of you who are used to video and sound, when you see media, sound and picture play at the same time, and when my lips move, the sound that I'm saying seems to come out of it. Sometimes you can be watching TV and your television will slip out of sync, or those of you who have had experience of making films, say in the 60s, would have been using not a video camera, but a film camera and a sound recorder, both of which would have run at 2 different speeds. And they weren't connected until you figured out how to connect them. So initially in the field, when people were recording sound and camera work and picture, the images were not in sync until certain mechanisms were developed to keep the camera and the sound recording running at the same time. Now Stuart is going to correct whatever errors I may have made in that and explain how sync really works.
No, I'm happy to talk about it. It's just that it coming out of nowhere, it might not make sense to a lot of people. But even the sound out of this PA system is a little out of sync.
Yeah.
Because every 48 feet represents 1 frame of film. And if you're 2 frames out, you really know it. So the test when we were mixing films and syncing things up was to set the sound forward a frame, watch this thing, and see what it looked like, and then set it back a frame, and if it tolerated that much of an offset, plus or minus a frame, you knew you were dead on. So that's what sync's about.
This was a skill that I was, arrogantly very proud to have, that I could look at an editing machine and I could say immediately, that is out by 2 frames. A frame is 24 frames a second. So I can still do it with my digital video students, and they look at me like I'm a nutcase. But it's really quite amazing to live in a world, which all of us old folks did, to know that you were, what a size of film is, like this big, a frame is this big, to know that you were 24 of those makes 1 tiny second to sound slips around either before or after. It's late or it's early. And who even has these skills anymore?
Plenty of people in the audience. Plenty of people.
What I think we'll do is we'll get into more of an explanation of how sync sound worked as we show more of the clips. So Num Chai is by John Marshall, and it's about a healing dance among the Jutwasi and the Kalahari, which is in a country that's now Namibia. And this one, the sound was recorded likely by Robert Gesland or a local person who worked as a translator named Colonel Ladimo. So can we play Num Chai? All right. I'm sorry, it must be kind of frustrating to have it just suddenly cut off, but it means there's more interesting stuff to see along the way. Who wants to talk about this one?
When you look at this, the only thing that you need to have in sync is the speaking through the lips. The rest of it is ambiance, as it were, really. That's my impression. It's hard for us because we have to swivel around, and the first thing I thought of, being an old film guy, was why don't we have a video monitor down here? That would be easy today.
Really?
54 years ago, when I worked at the Harvard's Carpenter Center, we would have been looking at celluloid on that screen. But now we could have a monitor. Oh well. Next time.
I was struck by the fact that the sound person has more freedom in this than they did for the next 20 years before there was a cable cut, so that the sound person could really wander around and get whatever sound they wanted, completely free of the camera, because they were not recording any kind of synchronous connection with the camera. And so you get it pretty close when the sick man is speaking or uttering. I was really struck by the quality of the sound, and then he could also go back to the crowd and could follow it around. So I think the actual access and freedom of the sound recordist is better here than some of the later films when you were completely connected by a very long wire, so that if he's the sound person and I'm the camera person, we are like physically connected. And sometimes sound will happen 30 feet away, but he can't get there. So I was struck by the freedom of non-synchronous sound. Also, I just wanted to say this was one of the films that made me become a filmmaker. I was so moved by this film. I wanted to, really jump in, and I joined DER a year after this.
Ernst, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, so there's that disclaimer that starts the film that the sound is non-sync. So they clearly wanted to make sure we're aware of that, and it seems like there's a couple of reasons why. I mean, one is that they're basically trying to fake sync. So this is this night-long ritual dancing, spirit possession kind of event. Is that kind of what's going on? And the whole film is sort of a record of that without any narration and so on. But there are moments like the one we saw. So many of it is much of it is shot sort of with a long lens, or long shot rather, and there's not a lot of detail that you'd be able to really pinpoint. That's what I'm hearing is that motion and so on. But then there are these occasional moments like this where we are seeing someone close up and someone who's making the sounds. Nonetheless, it's still ambiguous whether that was a sound recording of that exact thing that we're seeing or of a similar thing, and they've edited it in such a way as to appear sync. So it's kind of interesting for that reason, because it's so ambiguous. They're trying to create sort of fake sync, but they want you to know that that's what they're doing. So it's kind of interesting on these different levels, I thought.
Well, the other side of it is it probably went on for hours and hours. And you could take turns shooting. The camera makes a noise, so you hear the camera noise, you can't record. And then the camera person relaxes and the sound person moves in, and it's the same loop going over and over again. But also you might wonder why it's shot in black and white. It's pretty clear to me that the color emulsions weren't fast enough in those days to shoot in those conditions. And the black and white film was much more sensitive. This is not a scene that you're going to light with 1,000-watt halogens. No way.
Yeah. Well, they were in the Kalahari, so they took them a while to figure out how to use generators. I think that happened later on in their expeditions.
I think color film also was more vulnerable to heat, and it had much more color shifts, and black and white was much more stable. I don't think the Marshalls had a problem with budget, but the ratio, color film was at least 10 to 1 more expensive.
Mm-hmm. So
what Stuart was saying, like to add to that, so yeah, these things are repetitive, and so a sound recorder has an opportunity to record similar kinds of events happening even when they're not being filmed. And these kinds of techniques people still use. Like for example, when I did the sound for Leviathan a few years ago, there's a lot of sound that was sort of edited and to sort of fill out certain sequences. You've only got one shot to record something visually, but because labor is repetitive, the filmmakers were able to record sound of the same kinds of events happening over and over again, and then it's able to edit from those. So these kind of techniques are still useful.
But I think one of the reasons why you can sort of fake the sync is because it's a language we don't know, and once you get into dialogue that filmmakers wanted to record in the field, they really had to go for sync. And I think the next clip is from the Nuer. And it is a cattle herding people in the Nile Basin in Ethiopia, in a film by Hilary Harris, George Breidenbach, and Robert Gardner. And Stuart Cody came in and saved the day at a certain point. Again.
I was part of the crew.
What?
I was part of the crew. Hillary and Robert Gardner and I were in Ethiopia on a film project that he had conceived to film the Danakil nomads. And Hillary and George had gotten some money through Gardner's grant from the National Science Foundation, and had gone down to southern Ethiopia, Gambela, along the Barrow River, and they were hanging out with this group of people, the Nuer. They're very tall and skinny people, and they were having a wonderful time. George stayed on after they finished filming. Both George and Hillary died several years ago, and of course Robert Gardner is not with us either. But the reason that I wanted to show you this particular clip is that it happens 8 minutes into the film, and the beginning of the film didn't need any sync sound at all. This is the first occurrence of it. And later on I'll show you another clip from the same film. But let's look at it.
Okay.
These people are all about their cows. And some of that's fake sync. That is not sync sound. The sync sound will kick in soon.
With song, a man remembers his battles, his friends, and the beauty of his cattle.
Did you want to have both clips together, or is that it?
No, no, no.
Okay.
So you can really see why this had to be sync. You can't sustain a sequence like that without keeping the lips in sync. And then you say, what was the guy singing about? And so Bob Gardner tells us what he's singing about. That's traditional. But it's woven into a lot of layers of non-sync sound gathering, some of which was shot 2 weeks earlier or later. But it's all flows, and that's the important thing about sound, is that it flows, and it works. That's a pretty good sequence.
Is this a good time to just give a little primer on mixing quickly?
Mixing starts with laying up many different tracks on different rolls of physical, magnetic, perforated film stock. And these are run simultaneously for the first time when the filmmaker goes in to do the mix. The filmmaker, when they're editing, only has 2 tracks to run at the same time. And when you go to a mix, you can have 12 or 6 or 4, however many you need. And sounds that are butted up against one another, so there's no transition in between, have to be put on different rolls, physical rolls, with pieces of leader in between to space out the clips, the segments, so that you can actually automatically adjust as the sound travels through. It changes to a different channel on your mixing console. So this stuff you can spend easily an entire day on a half-hour film. That would be a good mix. That would be a fast mix.
So that would have been the way you did it. It wouldn't be the way Ernst would do it now.
Oh, now you could just, in 15 minutes, you do it on your Mac Power.
Crank out films like one right after the other.
Just slide those tracks around.
The point is that when you look at a soundtrack, listen to a soundtrack like the one you just heard, it's composed of many different layers of sound. You can have a sort of live dialogue, singing soundtrack, cow sounds on another soundtrack, smoke sounds or background sounds on another, and they all get eventually mixed together to create the sense of an entire world.
So when you're doing it that way, are you starting each, are they all being run from different machines so you can start each one? Yes. Separately, and then you have to run the mix and the timing
simultaneously? All at the same time.
All at the same time. You have a wall like this. I remember I was mixing right after a famous Hollywood film, The Godfather, and they had 50 dubbers, all would start at the same time. It was extraordinary.
Each with a different soundtrack on it.
Each with a different soundtrack, but all down to the second of being equal.
Down to the frame.
Yeah, to the frame. Yeah. I wanted to point out that for those of you who may not know your documentary film history, the first synchronous sound ever made was in 1939, Housing Problems in England. and they had a truck. They wanted to go where it was so, like get out of like the well-endowed filmmakers, and so they went to the slums of London and they wanted to talk to the poor people. So they got a full truck, a huge truck, put a studio in the truck, ran cables from the poor people's apartments down the stairs into the truck, and recorded people talking about the rats in their apartment. And it's a very famous film. It's 15 minutes. It was the very first sync sound made. And this is 20 years later. No, 30 years later. And people were really, really challenged technologically by how to put audio and film together without taking a truck with you.
Do you want to, that could lead us into the next newer clip, if you'd like to see that. It's got layers of sound. Do you want to do that? Cool. Thanks.
This is how we tell that it's in sync, the pounding of the corn.
Although that could have been faked.
Yeah, it could have been.
That could have been faked.
I could have cut that so it's fake.
Yeah, that was the point. It could have all been fabricated.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting excerpt because it goes in and out of sync. Like there is another moment of lip sync with that song, and yeah, but it plays with sync, non-sync. When the crowd scene, when there's sort of laughter going on, there's nothing that really gives away whether that's specifically sync or not.
But it's very deliberately crafted, believe me.
Oh yeah, and you can tell there's lots of different layers happening there, and the way it's coming in and out, and foreground, background, and especially this excerpt is interesting too because of whereas sound is in general sort of subjugated and controlled and dominated by image. In this case, just for a moment, it's turned slightly in the opposite direction, where the sound, the rhythm of that string music is used, at least for a moment, to sort of drive this editing technique, so using the rhythm of the music
montage follows
to
that.
drive that montage.
Very quick cutting slides, as it were, which the audience doesn't expect that to be in sync. They see this montage, and then it goes back to reality.
So shall we move into the ghost of film present, Sarah? And we'll move up north to Alaska. And I think Sarah's better at setting up her films than I am. So.
Yeah, I think I'm the ghost of the waning present. I think Ernst is really the present right now. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what were my main challenges and intentions when I started. I studied with Tim Ash and John Marshall and admired both of them. They were great mentors. And I saw a lot of ethnographic films, and I was really turned off by most of them. I don't know why I wanted to become a filmmaker, because I was so turned off by most of them, but it was kind of a challenge. I was looking for the voices of people, and when I mean voices, I mean not just the actual literal voice, but metaphorical, and I couldn't really find them in the previous films. And I wanted to find a way that I could have the people in a community really determine what was going to be filmed and recorded, and really be representatives. They would see themselves in the film and really have a lot of control over what we did. So I wandered around for 20, 30, 40 years trying to figure out this system, and came up with something that we call community collaborative. I worked with my partner in the early years, Leonard Kammerling, who is also co-director of all the films we'll see tonight. And the first thing I wanted to say was, when I put headphones on for the first time in the field, I was shocked to realize that I could be more tuned into the experience of what was happening around us than the camera person was. I like to think of the metaphor of the blinkers on horses, in the park, and the horses are forced to see that frame. And the camera does that to the camera operator, because they're in there looking through that lens, and they kind of block off a lot of their senses, even though all camera people are taught to keep their second eye open. Your brain is really focused on the lens frame. And as an audio recordist, you're completely available to all the noise behind you, all the sound behind you. And not only that, you're hearing the very intimate sounds of human beings, not always human beings, but the environment. So you hear sometimes even people's heartbeats, their gasps, their breaths, their whispers to somebody else, in a way, their thoughts almost. And there's an intimacy that really happens. Almost, I like to think of what happens when lovers are on a pillow or something and really speaking quietly to one another. And that's what happens when you have amplified headphones on. So I was first started being a sound recordist because I was the woman. And I studied with Ricky Leacock at MIT, and all of the women were told to be sound recordists.
Because camera was supposed to be more important.
It was, camera was more important. It was big and heavy, and no woman could ever carry such a big thing. Although, what's her name, who did the film on Annapurna, very famous camera woman.
Barbara Koppel?
No, she was really short and super strong. But, we all know what I'm talking about.
Margaret Mead.
So, no, she became a really good Hollywood camera woman. Not Sandy Sissel, but anyhow. so here I was, intimidated by the technology of the camera, because I was socialized as a woman. And I thought, okay, well, I'll be a good director and a good producer and a good interviewer. And that's the way I made my path. Then I suddenly found out, wow, there's this world that the camera is not even aware of. And I just started growing in my own experiences and figuring things out. So
well, unless, if I could just make a comment, I think Fred Wiseman always does his own recording on his films. So you're in the right place with the
And do
earphones
sound,
on.
too.
Oh yeah, obviously but I know a lot of people who have been in that same position. And this is I left Cambridge in 1972, started filming 1974, and I'm going to show you the second film that I did. And with this film, I'm just setting up kind of the environment. Humans live in place. Place is impacted by humans, and humans are impacted by place. And I really like just all of the films I've done, I've liked to really have them intertwined and not have them too separated out. I don't like what I call the Nat Geo kind of pretty scenes. You know, they're gorgeous and they have huge budgets and they can fly over planet Earth and they can show all kinds of gorgeous scenery. I'm really interested more in how humans navigate our environment and our place. So there's a simple clip. There's two clips here. The one is, it just shows where we're...
Is your mic just
it shows where we're at. We're on an island very close to Siberia. If you look, in the second clip, if you look really closely, you can see mountains in Siberia, which were 40 miles away from us, and were the metaphorical mountains that Sarah Palin saw from like almost 800 miles away, I think. But those mountains are Siberia, and you get a sense of the sound. Putting a whaleboat in is in the spring, and the snow is difficult to film in because every time you move, it crunches. You move your parka, and you can hear the sound of your own parka making noise. You have to be completely rigid. Someone's nodding. It's really, and the colder it gets, you know, at minus 30, you just like this, and it goes. And so you can get a sense of the and also there's children everywhere. They're just always children, and I wanted to get a sense of just the audio of putting a whaling boat in. It's made of skin.
So are we going to watch A?
Let me just say the second clip on this, hold on one sec. The second clip on this is the ice flows. I wanted to show actually the danger of the environment that we were in, and there's a hunter talking. In this clip, when we see the ice flows, it was really windy, and I could not get good sound. So I went out other days, and I recorded sound on other days, and then in the mix, it didn't, listen to this, it did not sound like what it really sounded like. So I intervened and I slowed it down and I made it become more what I thought reality was. So completely messed with it.
All right. So we're going to see the group that we call A? Yeah. Okay.
ايوه اوه Nga tada ang yak tum ning tag kanima ang yiga sunga tam tong we pam so we nakatang khataga mang talinga nga yu ikuta ta ko tali matak so tanga itigilang e o tak nga tada mak sagli nakakkuta ang yak tumikot nakakta ta Ilang akong pilih sekram tak bersatak sudah. Ayok kangen kot. Nasik kot kesukuk jangan ni. Anok ternak rago maka kerek kebol.
Okay, we can stop there. I just want to apologize for the bad quality. This is a really bad print because we need money to copy it again. And DER and us were trying to find money to make copies of all of this incredible human archive. I'm going to talk about DER for a second. 1960s, who was thinking about a human archive of sound and image? It was incredible that they'd been doing it for all these years, but this is an example that we're trying to redigitize this print. It looks gorgeous in its original iteration. It's absolutely gorgeous, but it's just so broken down now because of things. So there's another thing I want to talk about here, which is subtitles. That was my first attempt at subtitles. And what he was saying was very complicated, and I thought I could get away with it using 3-line subtitles. Since then, I've realized it's too much for the human brain to kind of get a 3-line subtitle and see what we're supposed to be seeing. So I've changed my strategy, and I've read a lot about translating poetry and working in different ways so that we can still get the meaning, but also and hear the intonation and the wonderful rhythmic cadence of the voice, which is so beautiful, and also, have the image so they're not fighting with one another. I consider this one as sort of my failures, but the shots are so incredible. But you can hear that I've slowed the ice down, and it sounds actually more like it did.
So do you want to go to the next clip?
Unless these guys have something to say.
I want to make sure we can see all of them. That's why I'm trying to hurry us along. Yeah.
Okay, next group. So the next group is very quickly, it's only a minute long, and this brings in the whole political aspect of our filming, where we wanted to really give up control, which for some media artists sounds like the worst possible thing you can do, but my particular feeling was that if I gave up control of the shaping of the film, I would actually achieve my artistic goals. So by giving control over to the community, I ended up getting a film I wanted. And this, we were going to film hunting on the ice, and it turned out that they really felt that women hunters were bad luck, and you would not get game if there was a woman out there. I went out as a strong feminist, had to make a quick decision. And I made it. I trained somebody, one of the hunters, to take sound. They said I could go out. Who wants the guilt of them not getting any game? That I was like, they might be right. And so I trained a hunter in very quickly, and the Nagra tape recorder was pretty complicated, and he had to learn a lot. And I was absolutely, in my naive East Coast way, dumbfounded that someone who didn't take a full sound recording class at university could take better sound than any of my colleagues. He was a hunter. He was trained to look and to listen. He could hear sounds that I wasn't even aware of. I explained perspective of the where the mic is and relative to the camera. He should look at the camera. If he heard sounds that the camera person wasn't hearing, he should let him know. He should stay out of the frame, and he should always know where the frame was at any moment, whether the cameraman was zoomed in or zoomed out. This is a lot to learn. He learned it like that. He was incredible. So this is his sound, and there's more to this politically. A very short 1-minute clip. I'm going to talk a lot about it. In this particular shot, they got a female walrus. They killed her. And they get up on the ice and they say, she's female, she's pregnant. We'll make a boat cover out of this. At the time, the Marine Mammal Act was being passed in Congress, and they were going to forbid all Alaska Natives from shooting marine mammals. And this was the only way they could get their protein. They got 2 whales a year for a village of, I think it was about 150 people. So we also didn't want to show them opening up this pregnant walrus and having the fetus fall out on the ice and make all this squishy sounds. It was incredible audio. And we did film it, and I recorded all the squishy part of the fetus and the uterus and everything, but we didn't put it in the film. A political choice. I also made the choice not to say she's pregnant, because we had, in our whaling film, we actually was boycotted in New York City at a festival because of killing whales. And I thought of all the people that would starve if they didn't eat those whales. So at the time, there was a lot of whales on the earth. They're not so much anymore. I think that's probably good.
All right.
Shot him just before.
may lucht ako. Kubaga sama to. Ata ka, ay may nakako. Ano mo kasi ano? Ano magkunan? May pesta ko na ko. Nato? Nato no na bakta. Anta, ay ka ko. Okay, standing at on there look.
And then it goes on to gut up the two walrus, and it's really quite exciting because the sound recordist Woodrow Maliwatuk was his name, and he really had the intimacy, and he was friends with everyone, so they were really joking with him, and it's a great conversation. So should I continue?
Well, I just wanted to point out that in this case, I just wanted to know where you or your substitute sound person were connected to the film person with a cable, or you were not connected?
Yeah, we had a cable.
Okay.
Yeah, we were still.
And then
in.
The sound person would have a boom.
Yeah. No, we never used a boom.
Okay.
It was too intimidating to people.
Okay.
We wanted to be kind of a quieter profile. So instead of having, a big fish pole, we just had a quite a large shotgun mic.
Okay.
We were still
which
connected.
Did the job.
And you can hear that ice and that snow crackling. My eyes were opened. We had a lot of overmodulation issues with the Arctic environment. One was just when it was like -20 and -30 degrees. It was weird what would overmodulate and what wouldn't. So I was constantly, completely tuning up the tape recorder to just almost like you're not supposed to do this, but I would just be riding it constantly, and it came out okay. Gunshots, however, always overmodulated. So when we paid for very expensive mixes in New York City, I wanted to learn how to lay really good soundtracks and go the Hollywood way. And I had always hired people who knew more than me. And we went in and we went to a sound library. I'd never been in one in my life. And they brought out like 100 sounds of guns. We were trying to get the rifles that had shot these two walrus because it peaked out in the audio. It just couldn't use it. And so we sat there like at a cocktail lounge in our chairs while they would bring in the different sounds, and we would sit there and like, no, that's not the right sound. But finally we had brought a native man. We were getting an award in New York for a previous film, and we brought the native man. We just let him pick the damn sounds, and he just picked it right that way. And then he could tell all the sounds of all the rifles just by listening to them, what caliber they were. Again, I was totally impressed.
Wow. Did you want to add something, Ernst? Or?
Just going to comment that with sound effects libraries, gunshot seems to be a very peculiar obsession for a lot of, but maybe that has a lot to do with the kinds of movies people are making these days.
Yeah. Should we go to the next clip?
Sure. So the next one is jumping ahead. Those were made in the early 70s. This one was shot in 78, but we didn't release it until 85 because we couldn't make it work as a film. It just wouldn't cut. We got a nice grant from the National Endowment for the Arts, and we were doing it on Yupik dancing, where I had spent a year between Cambridge and filming, being a school teacher. I actually taught all grades and all classes to high school kids, trying to learn the language and the culture. And cameras were not allowed in the dance house. It's a spirit sacred house. And so it had never been filmed before. And I thought maybe I could make a film about it. It was so moving to me. So I went out to the village and I asked, can we make a film in this dance house? And set up microphones and lights and everything. So the people in their 30s and 40s and 50s said, no, it's not allowed. You can't bring lights and photographs in there. The people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s said, life is changing. Life will never be the same, and we want the children who are yet unborn to know what we're doing now. And elders are the most respected people in their culture, so people had to do what the elders said. And the village after that embraced us and gave us access and helped us avoid some landmines and spiritual situations. So the access was remarkable, and by the end, they would come and get me, the audio recordist, and even when we didn't have enough money to shoot or something, or the camera wasn't around, they would come and say, record this, record this, record this. So the audio access was really quite remarkable. And I'll say we have digitized all of our audio archives to over about 250 hours, because film is very expensive in those days, not like today. And we couldn't possibly keep filming like you can today. You had to start and stop every 10 minutes, really deciding what you were going to film. And we couldn't possibly have filmed everything. So, but we do have this amazing audio archive, which we would, I would keep rolling and rolling and rolling and do hours of interviews. So this is a setup. The film is called Drums of Winter, and it's about their dancing that they do all winter long, and they have a competition with a neighboring village, but they practice all the winter long. And why don't we just, let me see. You're going to see, the music. I wanted to talk about music. Was very hard to edit. It was very hard to record because the drums were, again, like gunshots, really loud. And the human voices were sort of mid-range, and they didn't record well together, but I only had one microphone. So it was very challenging in terms of how to get this. And then the ambience of the room. I wanted in this film to have a contrast all the time between quiet and silence, and then this incredibly pounding, drumming music, which I always had to take, Tylenol by the end of the night. It's like, because I was so close to it. And so the experience of the quietness and then the really loudness, and later in that village you would have beautiful, quiet, natural sounds. This was before power plant was in, so we have a whole document of the sounds of a village before electricity sounds, and then a occasional snow go or something would go by. So we really paid a lot of attention to village sounds, and we did a lot of mixing of environmental sounds, which you're not going to hear, but you'll see the dancing, and then at the end,
we should move.
Yeah, so there's a historical component to the film where I wanted to figure out how you can do audio with history, and you'll see that too.
Cut here, and then, okay. Can we stop?
Yeah, I don't know what happened. It was.
That wasn't part of the sequence of. Well, let's just talk about what we just saw, and then you can set this one up.
Yeah, I'm just trying to save time. Okay. Can we go to the 11:20 clip? Can you find it? Number 5. And well, it's just, I don't need to talk about it, just if you can find number 5. Do you have a counter there? Oh, okay, keep going. It's a different kind of drum. Yeah, start here, I think.
In the old ways, there'll be people who was living before the schools were built. They had their houses in little igloos covered with mud, and they had no stoves. These are the people that in their times maybe they had their songs, and there's people around here who knows many of these old time songs that been passed on to us before we were even born.
Alaska, 11 janvier 1891. January 11, 1891. Chère maman, Pax Christi.
Dear Mother, peace in Christ. We dream of a great number of conversions, but the good Lord, who always has plans of mercy, tests our patience. I have great hopes for these poor people, even though they are so disgusting on the exterior that nature itself would stand up and take notice. But of course, one must know how to jump beyond nature in order to save souls.
We're just going to keep on going.
When I first danced, I remember it was on a weekend, on a Friday. I was in school that day, and I was very excited. I felt really special because the older folks during that day would look at me and say, you're going to be very nice tonight. I was nervous, I was excited. I couldn't wait for the night to come. When our song started, there was a whole bunch of, gifts right in front of us dancers, and they placed a sealskin right in the place where I was supposed to stand. And they set it up and everything, and I was all set to go. I had my headdress, my belt, my new dance fans, my new kasvak, and that was the first time I was gonna face the whole crowd. Like in the middle of attraction, I walked out. Dad brought me out there, and he set me where he wanted me to stand. I felt really afraid. I almost couldn't remember what to do. I guess my uncle thought it was time for me to begin dancing in public. My father, he sort of explained it to me a little bit, and he said that in this way, the first dancer is looked upon or recognized as a member of the community. I was afraid, I was scared. I couldn't look at anybody. I couldn't move my eyes. I just looked at one little spot I could remember. Just one little, maybe nail on the floor or something. I couldn't move my head like. Okay, cut it. My uncle told me that I should, swing my head back and forth like with my arms.
Okay, we're going to just cut it here. So you can see what I never liked films that when we look at ceremony from a distance. I wanted to experience ceremony from the inside, from personal, kind of intimate space, rather than just seeing all the costumes and not knowing what the hell people were really thinking. So again, that was sound that we had inherited from an old man who had it in his fish cache, and he decided to trust us with it. The sound was really awful, horrible. And I thought one way of mixing audio would be to get these young teenagers to talk about their own experiences, sort of mushed up the mix there. And to have more of an interior personal experience. And I'm going to cut the rest so Ernst can go on.
One of the things that's really wonderful about Sarah's film is, both her films, is that you really have a sense of the collaboration with her subjects and the acceptance, and there's something of acceptance by you as outsiders. You just seem more connected with the people in your films than, say, some of the previous films that we've seen. And I think that has a lot to do with both technique and also your goals as a filmmaker. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about was sort of an evolution of the ways in which filmmakers regarded their relationship with the people they were filming. And one of the reasons we wanted Sarah to participate is because of her strong commitment to collaborative filmmaking. Ernst and I just had a quickie conversation about trying to rush through a little bit because it's very close to the end. And what I wanted to do was skip to a piece of a film by a filmmaker named Tala Hadid. And she worked in Morocco with two sisters. And I'm going to read a tiny bit of what she said, and then we'll see one clip from her work. And I'm going to mispronounce this, Amazigh women in rural Morocco. And Tala, through an email, told us that sound is important as the image. It's the first of the senses we hear before we see or taste. We can hear in our mother's womb. And so sound has such a profound effect on the spectator. It doesn't just complete a film, it can shift a film in certain directions in the most subtle but important of ways. In her filmmaking, Tala sometimes shot sync sound alone, and sometimes she shot footage and had Khadija, her subject, take sound. And then sometimes she would send Khadija off with an audio recorder all by herself. And Khadija was supposed to record what she liked, sounds of streams, general sounds of the village, her friends, songs, the wind, things like that. And when Tala got back from filmmaking, she realized that Khadija had actually recorded some sound that Tala hadn't realized she'd recorded. And this involves Khadija's sister getting married. And Tala had asked her repeatedly how she felt about her sister getting married. And Tala and Khadija wouldn't tell her. But she did tell her because she recorded herself in sound. So I wanted to go to number 15, Khadija voiceover in-house.
تغيدو حدوي يكرم تغني مع جيش البحريرة يكرم وينو كيكلم قلو التامين ما ركز من لباس داش سلم فلاس أقول لاختزار بشاور تتما زيتن تتيجي من دكتلولي تتيل تكلم تتما زيت أشكو تما زيتني أنا تكتي
So it's interesting because it's this, in a way, it's this extremely conventional narrative technique, right? Of the continuity editing, the girls here, the sisters somewhere else. The sound is edited in such a way as to seem like she's thinking that. We were familiar, we know how to read that, but but it diverges in this interesting way because of this backstory of how that audio came to be. Especially without even the knowledge of the filmmaker, and that emerges from the possibility of a young, untrained person having a portable sound recorder that actually records decent sound, so that technology sort of makes this even remotely possible, that kind of thing could arise.
And now we have smartphones. We can do audio selfies. It's very empowering. That was a very beautiful scene.
Yeah, it's a wonderful film. We're gonna start heading toward finishing with a couple of clips that Ernst put together, and it's one scene is from Dead Birds by Robert Gardner, sound by Michael Rockefeller, anthropology by Carl Heider, and then the other film is something that Ernst has been working on. And do you want to set this up a little bit more?
Yeah, so the first will just be, and maybe we should just play the first part, that clip A from Dead Birds, and then the second one is material that was shot at the same time as Dead Birds, 1961, in what was then Netherlands, New Guinea, and recorded by Michael Rockefeller. So it was shot. The footage was shot by Robert Gardner, and then these kind of shorts have been put together that made use of this material, which wasn't used in Dead Birds. And I was brought into the picture to help put sound to these shorts, and for this, given access to the recordings that were made over the course of that summer of 1961 by Michael C. Rockefeller, who famously disappeared, in the November of that year. But yeah, why don't we just listen to them or look at them?
So watch them both in a row.
Sure.
Yeah. Tell us at the transition.
To those who take their customary way through a little grove of trees, this night seems no different from the others that have passed so slowly since the little boy was killed. The men have quit their towers for home, having seen no reason from the enemy to stay. Not long after, though, while darkness fell, some men returning late heard a man trying to quiet a pig he must have stolen. The challenge that they offered quickly turned to death, almost before the intruder turned to run. By the pale light of a full moon that tried to climb above the clouds, they saw what they had had to do. He was a member of a group belonging to the enemy, and now that he was dead, a reason to rejoice. The news that an enemy was killed spread rapidly to every village. Soon the sound of men's and women's voices filled the evening air. Before he joined them, Pua meant to celebrate alone. He'd found a dead bird, bringing home his pigs, and now he thought he'd cook and eat it. Before he leaves his home and joins the others singing victory songs, Pua takes the longest feathers and puts them like a warrior in his hair.
So maybe just say a word before we move on to the next clip. This film is famous in ethnographic film history for putting together for constructing a single narrative event out of footage that was shot over repeated events over the course of months, and for its voiceover, which presumes to know the thoughts of the subjects on screen and so on. But this clip I found particularly interesting because of the way the sound is used in order to sort of control the reading of this single narrative going on. So the sound, which is off screen, it's not something that's happening on screen, but we're hearing these things in the deep background. So this relationship between foreground and background, and the way that the sound is very intricately edited to give the sense that there's something going on in the distance,
which provides continuity.
Absolutely, right. Yeah. There was something else I was going to say, but
Bob Gardner had no access whatsoever to sync sound because his camera was very, very noisy.
Yeah.
He had an electrically driven camera, so he could shoot long scenes if he wanted to. He could shoot 11 minutes at a time, but his camera was very noisy. It was an Aeroflex 16S, so cumbersome that it had to be supported by a triangular body brace that went over the shoulder and grabbed you around the waist. And everything was shot that way. I think it was the only camera they had. Mm-hmm. Maybe they had a wind-up.
They had a couple of Bell and Howells.
Yeah.
But yeah, because of that, there was a couple of, so listening through to these recordings by Malcolm Rockefeller, occasionally there are times when they were recording at the same time the camera was running, and you can tell because the camera, you're hearing this going in the foreground. And so it created this particular style. Because of that, they had to work and edit together and edit sound in such a way that took advantage of that. Of course, a lot of it is dominated by the voiceover, but
it's amazing that he was able to get color footage in that environment. Mm-hmm. Even the shot of the moon, he must have run the camera at a slow speed in order to increase the exposure time.
Mm-hmm. And so for
ASA's 25, that's like unbelievable.
So for the shot that the short excerpt that we'll show from this Hubula short is takes advantage of this technique. So it's sort of a process where they're building what's called a kayo, and part of it was filmed, and a different part of the process was sound recorded. And so while what we're seeing is sort of short shots cut together from picture, what we're hearing is a single long shot. So it gives a different kind of depth to the ongoing nature of the activity, and a kind of intimacy that couldn't really have been achieved, I think, with sync sound.
And this is something you created recently?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I made the sound, or put the sound that Michael Rockefeller recorded.
Okay.
We actually hear Gardner's voice for a brief moment, along with Michael Rockefeller.
The sound of men constructing a new kayo. This is the Wayaklakex kayo, which had been destroyed by the Wataya.
Akla sama. Saya cuma ni bumbu padan khusus sebut. Kau dia. Aku sebut buat men. Kau dia aku sebut. Oh, kau nak kalau sana. Kau kalau kalau sana. Apa tu mel. Tadi apa bolanya? Anh mà kia nó hà lon. Anh phụ vả cho ăn vào thì bộ. Yang cái này không lấy gì. Wala ibang ko sina. Wala. Har kaya ra. Wala ka ibang mula ko na. Kate ar pot sarate. Itu apa khabar buat ule. Kaya lagi puru par. Amra kita kaya tahu anu dicoba kan. Kaya ada tadi. Harus dicoba aja.
He unties the cords.
This last was cut one of Wayaklakek and his men binding the erected columns. Cut number 2, them completing the structure with a rope being twirled in and out up to the top.
Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
No.
Okay. I wanted to leave time for questions. We might have like room for one question. Is there? Have we answered them all already? Yes.
Just in some cases, in post-production film, you can fill in like a whole silent film just with Foley effects and library effects, and that. So was that used much by any of you, or was it felt that in the ethnographic purity you would just want to use sort of location?
So the question is, how much faking do we use? The question is how much Foley and sort of created sounds do ethnographic filmmakers use these days?
Well, Ernst, why don't you answer for that last one? He was the audio editor.
That was all location sound. Yeah, I mean, for that, but that project was specifically about using the recordings that Michael Rockefeller made, and not to try to do sync fake sync. I mean, although played with fake sync at some points. But that's an ongoing question. It's like, so, if a film is about a relationship between the filmmaker and a place, we would be pretty surprised to see, say, for example, stock footage popping in, or footage that some other filmmaker shot that the filmmaker bought off the internet plopped in to as a way to portray a person's, or to do something that's related to a person's experience in a place. But a lot of filmmakers have no such feelings when it comes to sound. Like, as when I referred to sound being sort of subjugated and controlled, so because sound escapes so easily from a frame, there's no, famously, this film sound theorist, Michel Chillon, talks about there's no frame, for sound. Because it escapes so easily, filmmakers often find that they need to control it and to subjugate it and to make the sound do what the image wants the sound to do, rather than maybe what sound might have done at the time, or what might emerge from a sound recording on its own. And so as a result, a lot of filmmakers will put in the sound of footsteps, or the sound of a fish being cut with a knife, or whatever it is. But it remains a controversial topic.
So why don't we each have a last word? So you can start with the last word.
Well, both as a sound mixer myself and a colleague is about to jump out of his seat who mixed some of these films over there, Chaz Bicking, we would tell you that we had an extensive sound effects library which we wouldn't hesitate to pull from. And I know for a fact that one of Jim Townsend's tricks, who mixed a lot of these type of films in New York, he had quarter-inch tape loops that he would hang on machines that were vertically oriented. He would put an empty reel to hold the bottom of the loop, and he would run that through the machine for hours and hours if necessary. But he not only had one loop, he would have many loops. There was a wind loop. There were wind loops, which you might run 2 or 3 at a time, so that people wouldn't feel that it was loopy. There were bird loops. There were ambience loops. There were loops of clocks ticking, so that you could appreciate how quiet it was in the film. Because to make something quiet, you have to demonstrate something quiet. Yeah. Anything else, Chaz?
That's just the real sound. We're not talking about editing using magnetic paper clips to make the sound of caribou footprints at 20 below and things like that.
Ah, yes. Mm. Yep. Oh, people are very proud of their Foley moves. But in those days, we didn't even know the word Foley. It was just faked, I guess. Fire, you'd crunch cellophane.
It seems.
But wait a minute.
Okay, Sarah, just.
Okay, it seems to me that we're dealing with the word fake a lot, pseudo a lot these days, fake news. Truth has no bounds. Whose ever truth it is today works, right? So I think it's really interesting. I don't know where we're going, but it's the conversation, whether it's sound or it's facts, politics. It's a really interesting conversation, and I think all of us thoughtful people need to figure out what our intentions are and what we can trust, what we're really doing with sound. To me, those are the issues. Whether you make a fake footstep, because it doesn't matter. But what if you say...
Doesn't it?
What?
Doesn't it?
Well, so that's what I'll just leave it. The issue of fakeness is very much what we're looking at today, and I'm not going to answer the right or wrong. I think about it constantly.
The one thing that came to me as we were all reflecting on what we were going to think about for this panel was that I realized that back in 1964, when I saw that Nagra for the first time over at the Carpenter Center, I had no idea where this business was going in 2018. And we've had some incredible breakthroughs that we never would have imagined back then. Starting with faster film emulsions with less need for lighting, and we were able to shoot in color with faster speeds. And the idea of an 11-minute magazine with a motorized camera, that was a major breakthrough for documentary. I mean, primary would have never been possible without electrically driven cameras. And the introduction of crystal sync, which gets rid of this umbilical cable that we've all been talking about, was a big deal. It started with Leacock and Pennebaker, who had by then realized that you needed mobility, and they took the Bulova Accutron watch, which had a little tuning fork in it. Crystals were available, but they didn't realize that they could do that. They could hold the Accutron up to their ear and hear the tone of it, and they knew that that tone was, I don't know, 480 hertz or something, and they were able to derive a 60-cycle control track, which was recorded on the tape and used to actually drive the camera motor.
Okay.
That was a big breakthrough. And then I'm going to mention just lastly, wireless microphones. Big breakthrough for documentaries.
We almost showed we had on the slide a clip from Sweetgrass, which was a nice illustration of possibilities of wireless microphones, but have to see it another time.
With a wireless mic, you could have people in the middle of a field, like Wayak could be mic'd, right? I don't know where you'd put it.
You can put it on a sheep or a dog or a horse. I'm really sorry, we're going to have to cut this short. Ernst, do you have one last remark since you didn't? Okay. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you all. And thank you to the Harvard Art Museum.